On March 16, 2026, Dubai ran straight into its worst nightmare, and it did not come in the form of a collapsing tower or a banking panic. It came in the moment the city's main heartbeat stopped moving. A drone strike near fuel infrastructure at Dubai International Airport sparked a fire and forced a temporary shutdown, triggering a chain reaction that a city built on speed could no longer contain. Reuters reported that Dubai became the main epicenter of the region's aviation shock after the US-Israel war against Iran began. Roughly half of all cancelled flights in the Gulf during the first phase of the crisis were tied to Dubai, and DXB, the world's busiest airport for international traffic, suddenly became a symbol of how fragile even the most polished and expensive system can be when the hit lands not on the facade but on the artery. That is the core of this entire story. For decades, Dubai was selling the world more than luxury. It was selling absolute connectivity, the promise that you could get anywhere through this city quickly, smoothly, and without friction. In 2025, DXB handled a record 95.2 million passengers, linked 291 destinations through 108 international airlines, and was openly marching toward the psychologically massive 100 million mark. In a system like that, the airport is no longer just a transport hub. It becomes the city's nervous system, the source of its money, its tourism, its real estate premium, and its global status. The moment that nerve is hit, the damage spreads far beyond aviation. What this story gets exactly right is that the real disaster was never the size of the fire. The real disaster was the way it exposed an architectural weakness inside a model optimized so aggressively it had almost no room left for failure. The less buffer you have, the more devastating even a relatively small disruption becomes. Dubai had speed, shine, records, immaculate logistics, nearly surgical baggage handling, and passenger flow so efficient it looked untouchable. But that is exactly why any disruption instantly became more than a disruption. It became a stress test for the entire city. And all of a sudden, the place that marketed itself as the Switzerland of the Middle East was forced to confront one brutal truth. The whole system worked only as long as the skies above the Gulf stayed safe. The second that assumption cracked, hyper-efficiency stopped being a strength and started looking like a trap. To understand why this hit so hard, you have to go back much further than March 2026. You have to go back to the wager Dubai made long before oil turned it into a global symbol. The city's first paved runway opened in 1965, and Emirates launched in 1985 with just 2 leased aircraft, flying its first routes to Karachi and Mumbai on planes borrowed from Pakistan International Airlines. That is where Dubai's real genius lived. It did not wait for wealth to create infrastructure. It built infrastructure as a machine for manufacturing wealth. Emirates quickly evolved from a young airline into an instrument for reshaping global routes, and DXB transformed from a forgettable stopover into one of the most powerful hubs on the planet. By 2024 and 2025, Dubai was living inside a model of almost pure aviation power. The airport kept breaking records. Emirates remained a giant of long-haul aviation, and the aviation sector itself accounted for 27% of the Emirates' GDP while supporting 631,000 jobs, roughly 1 out of every 5 jobs in the city. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. Where do you think the line is between strength and dangerous dependence? Was Dubai hit by war or by its own model, where one superhub was allowed to become the center of everything? Because that is the deeper point. Dubai did not just build a successful airport and a world-class airline. It wired aviation into its economic DNA, from luxury retail and hotels to logistics, real estate, and its identity as a global living room. Even the relaunch of the giant Al Maktoum International expansion officially revived in 2024 with a projected $35 billion price tag, 5 runways, and an eventual capacity of 260 million passengers a year showed the scale of the ambition. Dubai was not trying to hold on to leadership. It was trying to swallow even more of the global sky. But a structure like that works only if one thing remains true. The world has to trust your airspace, your roots, and your geography. Once that trust begins to wobble, the entire machine starts shaking in multiple places at once. And that is exactly what happened in spring 2026. After the strikes on Iran and the retaliatory attacks on infrastructure across Gulf states, the aviation map of the region started redrawing itself almost in real time. Reuters tracked airspace closures and restrictions, stranded passengers, planes turning back mid-flight, airlines slashing schedules, and major international carriers not just rescheduling, but fundamentally re-evaluating the region. British Airways, for example, announced long-term cuts to parts of its Middle East program, including reduced frequency to Dubai, while Heathrow openly acknowledged a new climate of uncertainty and the possibility that shifting global flows could partly benefit London. For Dubai, this was not a temporary inconvenience. It was a strike against the city's most valuable intangible asset: trust. The moment families in Europe, executives in Asia, insurers, tour operators, and investors begin to see the Gulf route as a risk zone, Dubai loses more than transit traffic. It loses the aura of reliability that had shaped decisions to buy apartments, open offices, move capital, and even relocate families. This is where the idea of a perfection trap becomes brutally accurate. DXB really was a system built for constant flow. In December 2025, it processed a record 8.7 million passengers in 1 month, and on January 3, 2026, it hit a single-day record of 324,000 travelers. That level of throughput looks spectacular when everything works. But it also means there is almost no room for a strike, a fuel disruption, a rerouting wave, or a panic-driven collapse in confidence. And from there, the damage spreads outward. Reuters was already reporting signs of weakness in Dubai's real estate market by March, with transaction volumes falling sharply, some sellers cutting prices, and analysts warning that the conflict was hitting a model already entering a period of massive new supply. At the same time, war risk insurance was rising, the luxury segment was wobbling, and premium retail locations were seeing lighter traffic and weaker sales. In other words, the March strike was dangerous not because it physically destroyed Dubai. It was dangerous because it forced markets, elites, and ordinary passengers to ask a new question. What if this super hub is no longer unquestionably safe? But the most painful layer of this story is not even the war itself. It is the fact that the world is changing in ways that are starting to work against the very logic of megahubs. The video correctly identifies the final blade hanging over Dubai. Long-range aircraft technology and the rise of alternative hubs are gradually reducing the need for mandatory stopovers in the Gulf. Dubai rose as a masterstroke of geography, a brilliantly positioned connector between East and West. But the better aircraft become, the longer non-stop routes get, and the stronger competing hubs grow, the less global aviation depends on a middleman. That does not mean Dubai is disappearing tomorrow, far from it. The city still has massive advantages: brand power, world-class infrastructure, money, managerial discipline, Emirates, cargo capacity, tourism appeal, tax advantages, and real experience recovering from past shocks. But March 2026 left a scar that cannot be hidden behind mirrored terminal glass. It showed that even the most sophisticated infrastructure organism can become too specialized, too confident in its own centrality, and too dependent on one assumption: the world will always fly through us. And the world, it seems, is slowly learning how to fly differently. Heathrow is already hoping to absorb some of the traffic that shifts. Istanbul remains a formidable east-west competitor with room to scale, and airlines around the globe are being forced to redraw route maps in an era of expensive fuel, war risk, and an increasingly unstable Middle East. That is the real drama of Dubai. Not that the city has somehow fallen, that would be too simplistic. The real drama is that one of the greatest aviation projects of the modern era has, for the first time, come face to face with its own limit. Dubai is still rich, still dazzling, still powerful. But now the world knows that power is not immortal. The miracle in the sand was never fake. It was a real engineering and strategic triumph. But March 2026 delivered the kind of cold reminder history loves to repeat. The more perfect an empire of connectivity becomes, the more terrifying the moment when the world begins searching for another route.